welcome back to the lecture series. We are discussing features of the novel in the light of E.M. Forster's work, aspects of the novel. So, in the last lecture, we were talking about fantasy and prophecy, the fantastic and the prophetic elements that we find in the novel. Uh, as a continuation of the discussion, we need to understand that fantasy involves the unearthly. We were talking about the small gods that do not make large claims, that do not come to transform us in a very big way, but that nonetheless illumine the narrative. Both fantasy and prophecy are like bars of light which do not show in the narrative but which transform everything around it, right? So this small god of fantasy could be hidden and lurking in the narrative. The demigod or the supernatural being has very, human like qualities, and it still never ceases to amaze us by its presence. So, fantastic could be, in the words of E.M. Forster, I quote from the book, introduction of a god, ghost, angel, monkey, monster, midget, witch into ordinary life, or the introduction of ordinary men into no man's land, the future, the past, the interior of the earth, the fourth dimension, or divings into and dividings of personality, or finally the device of parody or adaptation, unquote. Once again, he says in another part of the work, fantasies give us only the old story of the wishing ring, which brings either misery or nothing at all, unquote. So, these old stories could be related to the Jungian idea of primordial image or mythology, the idea of primordial image that Carl Jung conceives for the first time, which has a striking accord with familiar mythological motifs. So, the contents of the primordial image resonate with our collective unconscious, and it is shaped by continually operative processes such as learning, acculturation, and experiences, as well as certain inner determinants of psychic life. Carl Jung devises the term archetype, which traces its origin in the Greek language, meaning original pattern or model. Now, the tabula rasa theory claims that individuals are born without any intrinsic mental content, such that knowledge comes only from experience and perception, the processes, the experiences that we undergo after birth. The proponents of tabula rasa theory, however, disagree with the theory of innatism. So, innatism is another school which holds that mind is already in possession of a certain knowledge. Carl Jung rejected the tabula rasa theory. He actually favored the theory of innatism. According to Jung, while archetypes do lack a solid content, we are not born with some solid knowledge. However, our conscious is in a way blank, in a sense blank. We do have some, a priori understandings or ideas or pictures, images that we are born with, and they belong to the unconscious. Uh, so this unconscious forms an a priori substratum of our mind. So archetype is the basic state common to all human minds, upon which individuals build their own experience of life, which ultimately comprises the conscious layer of our psyche. And so the unconscious is further colored with unique culture, personality, events, and so on. E.M. Foster notes that fantasy could be about the last of the witches that wishes decentralization from a scientific world, that wishes to smash the world as it is, and urges the magic ring holder to seek happiness, which is a wish that has not been made in the history of the ring. So, the true fantasist makes the kingdom of magic merge with the commonplace world. Author Norman Matson uses happy with forever. This is an impossibility. And so his character says no to happy forever. While happy is the ordinary aspect of human desire and therefore achievable uh, in a limited way, happiness is achievable in a limited way. Forever is the fantastic side, which evades human conditions of existence. Nothing is forever, everything is in a state of flux. So, the archetype of the magic ring that constantly seeks happiness but is imperiled to slip into misery at any moment could also uh, be close to the Lacanian concept of jouissance or neonatal bliss, uh, which we subsequently tend to lose once we are introduced into the world of symbols and conventions. Once we become too, too much part of the social self, the conventional self, we tend to give up on our jouissance. So, fantasy could be seen as the Lacanian real stage where jouissance can be perceived in its best sense. So, Jacques Lacan notes that the real is as such impossible. This is because the needs of the real stage cannot be expressed in language, and once we make an entry into the world of language, into the world of conventions and symbols, they mark our irrevocable separation from the real. We are in a state of jouissance when we cannot, we are constantly needing and demanding, but we don't have the equipment of the language to kind of put in words what we want and what we demand, what we desire. Once we have language, the jouissance is gone. So we don't demand anymore. We become a subject. Our subject formation has already begun. So as our adult conditions constantly pushes away the real, recognizing the unachievable premises of the real stage, the jouissance, causes us trauma, and in fact, obsession or fixation with jouissance leads to what Julia Kristeva would call as the state of abject and melancholia. The fantasy is similarly a chimera like the real stage or the state of jouissance. The fantasy tends to slip away constantly. It is there, but not quite. It is like a chimera. So, the fun, charm, and yet profundity that are emanated by a good work of fantasy cannot be surpassed in beauty by a serious literature. The message that we can convey through, deploying fantastic elements cannot be quite conveyed through a serious piece of literature. Parody or adaptation draw on a pre-existing tradition from where the creative artist identifies a pattern and takes a swing to gain strength. They apply their literary genius to revisit a literary tradition which acts as the stove. However, it is important to note that fantasy and social satire are not always interchangeable. They are similar but not quite the same. And so, drawing any parallels between the two could be a facile job. Parody could draw on a musical, social, political institution and erect a world of its own based on imagination. Here we have in our mind James Joyce's Ulysses, which is based on Odyssey. So, through Ulysses, Joyce is inverting or rather subverting the Victorian values and drawing on an epic tradition in order to achieve it. Right? He's drawing on, like I said, Homer's Odyssey. Joyce deploys mythology for crafting a stage and characters that address his own thoughts. In E.M. Foster's words, I quote, Ulysses aims, to quote Foster, to make crossness and dirt succeed where sweetness and light failed, a simplification of the human character in the interests of hell. Unquote. So Joyce's novel transposes from Ulysses's sea voyage in Greece to the journey of an ordinary man in Dublin from morning to midnight. We trace the duration of an entire day in the life of this man, which is defined by chaotic, mediocre tasks. So, Joyce's protagonist, Mr. Leopold Bloom, is a converted Jew. He is greedy, he is lascivious, timid, undignified, desultory, superficial, and he is always at its lowest when he pretends to aspire. He is anything but Ulysses. He tries to explore life through the body, right? And Penelope is Mrs. Marion Bloom, who is an extravagant soprano, by no means she's harsh to her suitors. So in Homer's Odyssey, we see Penelope having the strength of character, where she spurns her suitors. She's waiting for her husband to come back after the journey. And here, Marion Bloom, a soprano, never spurns her suitors. She's never harsh to them, not by any means. Then Stephen Dedalus, from the portrait of the artist to the young man, is worked into Ulysses, which is an epic of dissolution. So, Stephen Dedalus, who is a protagonist in his earlier work, Portrait of the Artist, has been, kind of transplanted and foisted in his Ulysses. So, Stephen Dedalus here becomes the spiritual son of Joyce's protagonist, Leopold Bloom, and he can be seen as parallel to the character of Telemachus. Critics often read Stephen as the literary alter ego of James Joyce himself, and he also indirectly embodies aspects of Hamlet. So, in Ulysses, in Joyce's Ulysses, intertextuality is brought in to show how the modern world uh, brings in uh, qualities or features of epic. How can we have an epic in the modern times, in the debased world, in the world with debased values, diminished values? How can we rework epic? How can we work Kunstelroman, for example, in the modern world? What happens uh, when the epic hero or the Kunstelroman protagonist navigates into the modernist literary scape of early 20th century Ireland? So here we are talking about Dublin in 1904. So the aim is to show the degraded civilization, the debased form of art, life, and the infernal quality of life where sexes could interchange, personalities melt, orgy is joyless, and there is, simply put, there is no respite. Uh, we have introduction of Leopold Bloom in the story as follows. I quote, Mr. Leopold Bloom ate with relish the inner organs of beasts and fowls. He liked thick giblet soup, nutty gizzards, a stuffed roast heart, liver slices fried with crust crumbs, fried hen coats roes, but most of all, he liked grilled mutton kidneys, which gave to his palate a fine tang of faintly scented urine. Unquote. A nauseating, feeling that the reader is. So it's very fulsome. It's very nauseating for the reader who is reading um, a description such as this. It appeals to the senses in a very vulgar manner and in a very negative fashion. It talks about sensory excesses, that are not at all pleasant for the reader to envision or fathom, right? So from here we are going to talk about another work in the light of prophecy. Jane Eyre can be read as a prophetic piece. Thomas Langford notes that although apparently simple in structure, Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte contains a quality of imagination and insight which borders on the visionary and prophetic, a quality that is presented with sufficient subtlety to condition the reader's response almost imperceptibly. So, the narrative of Jane Eyre is informed by Charlotte Bronte's power of imagination, which is reflected through uh, the protagonist Jane's prophetic vision. Presentiments, sympathy, and signs add a mysterious texture to the novel. Sympathy baffles mortal comprehension, especially the way it works among estranged relations, right? For example, prophetic signs in the novel could be how the nature reciprocates and sympathizes with human emotions. Thomas Langford, once again, I quote him, uh, he states, from Jane's prophetic dreams just before her wedding day to the lightning blasted chestnut tree foreshadowing Rochester's tragedy, to the telepathic call which comes to Jane at Marsh End, the reader is seldom free from the influence of these prophetic suggestions and revelations. Unquote. So, these prophetic suggestions, these, reciprocation between human and outside nature, human emotion, and natural happenings uh, provide a continuity and a unity to the novel. The difference between prophecy and preaching is as follows. So, preaching involves traditionally understood higher discussions. It involves God, question of sin, morality, pardon within the limited ambit of the mundane. And preaching does not really raise to another plane. On the other hand, prophecy links characters and situations to the infinite, and this infinite reciprocates, comes back to talk to the or speak to the ordinary. So, ordinary individual has the wing to take him to the extraordinary plane in the case of prophecy. The greatness present in the message of a dream or prophecy cannot be simply delimited or arrested to the mundane alone. So, while the preacher is adequate and homogeneously constructed and located in the moral and mythological world, the prophetic character's mind uh, somewhere dwindles between the frame of the ordinary and something that expands, that outgrows the ordinary into something larger. So, which shows in the character's state of ecstasy and rapture. So, ecstasy and rapture are, some of the features of the prophetic character. Even as the prophetic character connects to the extraordinary plane, it is also immediately relatable and identifiable. Contrastively, a preacher's dreams do not take off from the center of reality. It is constantly making reality as its original point of reference. Such a dream tries to find a logical connection uh, to the reality, and therefore can never be a song or a resonating sound. For example, a, a preachy voice or a preacher does not talk of poetry or philosophy, but produces or tends to produce, aims to produce a singular meaning through even through songs or something magical. So the aim is to produce something prosaic, something singular and definitive. The prophetic writing has a bardic quality, the quality of a bard, and sound becomes more important than words and thoughts. The musicality, the sound of the speech becomes more prominent than what is being spoken, what is being thought. uh, so for example, George Eliot, as Ian Foster notes, in the capacity of a preacher, says sympathetic things about dreams, uh, and not something that is bizarre and defiant of the common sense, right? So George Eliot talks about dreams, but he never defies or he never goes anti to common sense. That's where he remains only a preacher and cannot become a prophet. He is not bizarre. He does not defy the commonsensical plane. Fyodor Dostoevsky can weave in reality through description of little things, and as a prophet, Dostoevsky offers a rough and yet a rich narrative surface to readers, something that one cannot take down in one go, something that is difficult to crack, but which is richer nonetheless, which offers friction between what we are accustomed to read, and what we are comfortable to read. So it in a way challenges our comfort zone as a reader. That is the prophetic writing. It pushes us to move beyond, move outside of our plane of or zone of comfort. So as D.H. Lawrence observes, lacking the tone of sermons, denunciation or advice, the sweet tone of bullying on the part of the prophetic writer leads the reader to a sense of futility. Just the opposite in the case of preaching. Preaching is more sincere, preaching is more limited, and preaching leads to something, almost definite, utilitarian, something one could apply in life and lead a very a happy life in the most ordinary and mediocre sense. But the sweet tone of bullying, where prophecy is not giving away any immediate meaning, uh, always makes the reader land up on a sense of futility, right? So, in order to enter and inhabit the world of prophecy, E.M. Foster asks the reader to shed her presumptuous notions of possible, impossible, plausible, implausible, and also give up to an extent the sense of humor, so that we don't laugh off or scoff at the author's prophetic vision. The prophetic vision is bizarre, like I said. We ought not, to laugh at such a vision. It requires of the reader much like in the case of the reader of fantasy, much like in the case of the reader of fantasy, an innocent participation or traveling along. So it requires of the reader, much like in the case of the reader of fantasy, an innocent participation or traveling along the path of reading. Uh, Unlike fantasy, prophetic writing has an eye for unity, however. So, prophet is on a more far off emotional plane while composing. Uh, for example, a note of joy in the prophetic could be so high as to be terrifying uh, and out of the world. So the joy is so large, the joy is so great, it is so emancipatory that it could be terrifying and ultimately kill one. So, a strong presence of conscience contracts the effect of a prophetic writer. So, a prophetic writer is not really led forward by the strong presence of a conscience or any moral yardsticks. I quote E.M. Foster to draw close to our lecture today and draw close to this discussion on prophecy. Foster notes, the human mind is not a dignified organ, and I do not see how we can exercise it sincerely except through eclecticism. And the only advice I would offer my fellow eclectics is, do not be proud of your inconsistency. It is a pity. It is a pity that we should be equipped like this. It is a pity that man cannot be at the same time impressive and truthful. Unquote. This implies that the exploration of the human psyche is in fact a difficult, discursive, futile process, and it unfurls so many different kinds of oddities which may not give in, which may not give away very immediately, or do not succumb to easy pedestrian meanings that comforts the reader. The prophetic presence, the fantastic presence could at the most be a game of resilience for the reader, not offer any immediate uh, comfort or a reading niche in the traditional sense, and it might demand of the reader to rework their uh, basic reading skills, the kinds of qualities they bring to the table while reading the novel, right? With this, I would like to stop our lecture here today, and let's meet with a new module and new discussions. Thank you.